MSNBC's Morning Joe had this to say about the Republicans connected to Donald Trump and involved in January 6th. Let's listen.
Because they're fascists, like people that are making the threats, the people that helped Donald Trump on January 6th, the people that were talking about coming to D.C., that it was going to be crazy, that it was going to be wild, they were going to charge the cap. They're fascists. And so they're making fascist threats, and we need to do what the United States has always done. We need to confront fascism and defeat it. So everybody that's freaking out over fascists being fascists, well, guess what? That's what fascists do.
CEO of Status Coup, Jordan Chariton, and Newsweek contributor Denise Long join now to weigh in. Welcome to you both.
Good morning.
Now, Jordan, I know it's tough to compete with that substantive analysis, but you tweeted yesterday, separate from the partisan pro-Trump versus anti-Trump reactions to the Trump raid, meaning the FBI's raid of Mar-a-Lago, pretty striking the folks giddy about going after Trump were crickets about Obama and the DOJ not going after Bush or bankers that destroyed the global economy. Tell us more about that comparison.
Yeah, I mean, hey. Kudos for going after Trump. People on both sides of the aisle will either love it or hate it. But these cosmopolitan elitists don't seem to feel the DOJ should enforce financial crimes, fraud that paralyzes the global economy, crushes working people, forecloses on people. They were pretty much crickets on that. And, of course, were silent on, President Obama once he said, yeah, it's time to move forward, not look backwards. So it's interesting what outrages them, what kind of gets them fired up. It's not crimes that might affect working people, and it's not crimes that actually lead to endless war. So that's really what I was driving at there.
Someone who's not been very silent lately, former U.S. Secretary of State and Democratic nominee in 2016, Hillary Clinton, has certainly had an interesting reaction to yesterday's raid. She's been posting and selling merchandise that says, "But her emails." Clinton tweeted, "Every But Her emails hat or shirt sold helps Onward Together partners defend our democracy, build a progressive bench, and fight for our values. Just saying." Denise, is this a fair comparison? I think, maybe it might be. I've seen people making it. The criticism of Hillary Clinton and actually, the FBI looking into her for, not properly classifying or securing emails on the right server, et cetera. Is that comparison correct to what Donald Trump is being accused of so far with the taking documents that were being wrongly classified or should have been left for the archives? What do you think?
So the question becomes, is that actually the case? I'm still trying to wrap my mind around what they use to actually justify the warrant, and if they ask for the documents back and the former president refused to give the documents back, just what are the circumstances? I think those things are unclear. And I do think, absent them requesting the documents back and Trump and or his staff refusing to give them back and to keep them, that seems different than what Hillary Clinton did in regard to the server and all of that and the destruction of the devices and the emails and all. It seems different to me. And to the larger point, I think people, while they're celebrating, one-upmanship, gotcha here, gotcha there, what we need to be looking at is the integrity of how our federal enforcement and our alphabet agencies are leveraged against people in power, but also about how they're leveraged against or for the benefit of the average American citizen. And I think too many people are drunk on seeing the opposition bleed rather than looking at how our government is being used to our benefit or not.
Yeah, I think that is what's so frustrating about weighing in on this thing as a leftist is that, yes, there's the hypocrisy of people who say, Blue Lives Matter, but are now posting the American flag upside down and saying we've got to abolish the FBI. Marjorie Taylor Greene was doing that. Candace Owens was saying we have to abolish the FBI. But there's this other point, which is that if anything, this is what Jordan was saying, I would like there to be more instances where people who are affluent and powerful had to play by the same rules rules as everybody else, and fewer instances where agencies were weaponized against the poor. So there has been a lot of, I think, justified discourse among conservatives about whether or not hiring the large number of new IRS agents is going to actually result in affluent people being held accountable under the tax code and having to pay their fair share, or whether it will continue the pattern of working class people, lower income people being the subject of audits. And same here, it is less, I think, a conversation, it should be less a conversation about whether or not, Donald Trump should be the target of this investigation, at least until and unless the warrant is proved to be unsubstantiated. A conversation about why we haven't seen this kind of thing in the past. Jordan, do you think we will see more of an appetite for these kind of investigations of former presidents? Are Democrats opening the door to these kinds of warrants and searches of former presidents or presidential candidates' homes with this search?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the legal expert you are, but I think it is important. We don't know yet if this is exclusively about the mishandling of records. I find it hard to believe that the FBI went in commando style over classified records. There might be more here. But I mean, everything has been heightened. Everything has become a culture war, and everything has become, part of kind of red team versus blue team. So if the Republicans retake the House based on the FBI going into Mar-a-Lago, even if it ends up that it's justified, I mean, we could be seeing them, raid Biden, President Biden, based on, or trying to do that over Hunter Biden or a plethora of other things. So, yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I think partisanship, particularly Republican extremism, not that the Democrats are innocent here, trying to weaponize, agencies and things like that, definitely could be heightened, even if this proves to be justified.
Denise, Bree is right that you've seen a lot of chatter from Trump sympathetic figures, Republicans, et cetera, in the time since this raid has happened about reforming or even abolishing certain law enforcement agencies, bringing DOJ, FBI, et cetera, under control. There's all this attention paid to violations of or perceived violations of Donald Trump's civil liberties. And what I always say in reaction to that is, what about everyone else? Can Republicans stay on the ball and actually, when they take power back, or work with Democrats to actually rein in some of these law enforcement abuses? Because these are the same people, and this is bipartisan, that reauthorize the Patriot Act and everything else every time it comes up for a vote. And then they complain like, oh no, G-men are banging down Donald Trump's doormat. Well, you authorized that. You voted for that. You supported that. They only care about it when it's Trump. So can there be any sustained movement? I would support it. I would be totally in favor of it for reining in these abusive law enforcement agencies. They seem to only care when it's Trump.
Well, I would submit to you that nobody has cared over the last, 50 years or so, including Democrats who oversaw some significant abuses of the FBI on American citizens as well. So none of them have really taken a look at how our federal agencies that are designed to enforce and provide intelligence for national security are weaponized against the American people and internationally, and no one has seemed to want to own our responsibility to ensure that that weaponization does not actually happen. It is rich that folks who are so pro, law and order when it comes down to what's happening in urban environments and when it comes down to police accountability for, surveilling civilians are, decrying the United States. And I wonder if any of them happen to be caught with something that they shouldn't have in Russia, if folks will be celebrating that they got caught. So there's hypocrisy all around that needs to be addressed across the spectrum politically.
Yeah, I think that's right. But I have to ask you, Jordan, I mean, I agree that Democrats and Republicans alike have largely turned a blind eye to this kind of a thing, but the left has not. And many people on the left have used this opportunity to raise concerns about any number of COINTELPRO attacks that have often historically targeted members of left groups, communists, socialists, people like Martin Luther King and Fred Hampton, all traced back their harassment and death, murder, to organizations like the FBI? Is this an opportunity for the left to be heightening those contrasts and distinctions and potentially getting some allyship from members of the conservative community who are perhaps newly aware to the vulnerability of regular people to these state agencies?
Absolutely. I mean, as Joe Scarborough is hyperventilating about fascism, maybe somebody should tell him about the Standing Rock protests in 2016, where Obama's FBI, Department of Homeland Security, surveilled Native Americans and their white allies, infiltrated the camps with moles. I mean, The Intercept had great reporting on here. Was working with the local police there to brutalize, nonviolent protesters, unarmed, with, mace, tear gas, rubber bullets, grenades. I mean, I was there covering it. That was actually corporate fascism, the police working with the fossil fuel companies to batter down dissent. I didn't hear Joe Scarborough, CNN, saying anything about it. Hell, they didn't cover it. So there's plenty of examples of, corporate fascism, and of course what the FBI did with Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, indigenous leaders. I mean, Leonard Peltier is rotting in a prison for 45 years over, an FBI raid where they don't even have evidence. They still don't have actual evidence against him. So yeah, plenty of examples of that. It would be great if we heard our elected leaders on the progressive side to start speaking out on this, while the rare instance where conservatives want to pick a fight with the FBI.
Yeah, going back to that clip of, fascism, 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 fascism. Denise, I think a lot of, or some at least, Republicans, will say that, okay, it's not plausible, or it's not believable when Democrats and when the mainstream media contends that Donald Trump is this unique fascistic threat, and thus, everything and anything that can be done to counter him from trying to make him ineligible to run for re-election, or raiding his household, that can be done because he is a uniquely dangerous threat. He's the fascist, he's the Hitler, etc. But then, of course, there's a long history of Democrats in the media saying that about, the previous however many Republicans. So it's like is it a boy who cried wolf kind of scenario?
Yeah, I think fascism has been fetishized in a way. Everybody wants to use it to just highlight something that they vehemently disagree with. I think in some ways, one might argue if this raid on a former president's home does not yield something significant on its face that they were looking for, or if they find something else that they can leverage to keep him out of office, is that not fascism? And I highly doubt that the current president's administration was unaware that our federal government was going to raid a former president's home. It just doesn't pass the sniff test for me. So there are ways that this could very significantly backfire on the Democrats if this raid becomes a political game that was played. And every person in America, regardless where you stand on the political spectrum, needs to raise all kind of hell about our government being used in that way. And not just for Donald Trump, but again, for all the reasons that everybody on this panel have stated about our government. We shouldn't fear our government. They should fear us.
Yeah, well, of course, the White House, Karine Jean-Pierre, denies that Joe Biden was aware. And if we find out information to the contrary, we'll definitely be reporting on that. Thank you so much, Denise and Jordan, for joining us today.
Thank you.
More Rising right after this.